Mustache Tales.
Yeah!
This is what episode of Mustache Tales? Doesn't really matter, but our incredible guest is James Roday. He's sitting here, I imagine, in California. But the show we're talking about, James Roday from Psych, from A Million Little Things or Pieces?
Things. You nailed it. Few people
Million
do.
Little Things. And, of course, Dukes of Hazzard and Beer Fest. But the show you guys were talking about before we really got into this was called Nailed It.
Nailed it.
Yes. And Nailed It was, they said to me, hey, my agent calls me and goes, hey, would you do my friend's show? They need a celebrity. And I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. And I said, but I only have like an hour because I got to go pick up my kids. And they're like, yeah, no problem. Of course, the agent's like, no problem. So we're cooking these George Bush, no, we're cooking Donald Trump cakes. That's the thing they decided, because they wanted the contestants to try to cook a cake. But if you're not a professional cake baker, your cake's going to look like shit, which they were trying to make Donald Trump look like, I imagine. They succeeded. And so they're putting the cakes in the oven around the hour point. And I'm like, how do we judge the cakes if they're not done yet? And they're like, oh, no, you look at them when they're done. I'm like, when? They're like, it'll be about an hour. And I'm like, no, I got to go. I told the guys I got to go. And they're like, what? So I go, and I'm like, I'll come back. I'll be back as fast as I can. But when I come back, I make a critical error, which is I bring a cup of coffee from Starbucks. So I clearly stopped off at Starbucks. I didn't come back as fast as I could. And they're like, oh, you stopped for Starbucks. I'm like, no, I brewed it in the garage. And they're like, what? Somebody believed that. Because people have asked me, do you have a brewing thing in your garage? So then I'm like, oh, they'll cut all this crap out and they'll pretend like I never left, right? They'll just go, okay, here, we'll just do the Hollywood thing. And when I see it, they put all
the Hollywood
of it
thing
in.
being leaving or editing?
I thought they cut everything out. I never left, right? They just, show business. But they cut me leaving. They cut me coming back. I have the coffee. They cut that in. And they're trying to mock me, I think. They're trying to come at me and make me the villain of their show. Meanwhile, I become a superstar with children.
Yeah.
I have taken so many pictures with 7, 8, 9-year-olds who are like, you're a good daddy because you went to get your kids in the shop. And I'm like, I am a good daddy. Thank you.
Sure.
So I got over on them.
You're a good daddy and a husband who doesn't want to be yelled at when he gets home.
I was in trouble that day.
I mean, that's a scheduling. You were just balancing
That's
schedule.
right.
So did the show get picked up? Nailed it? It became a real cooking show?
It ran for years. Yeah. It's
I
huge.
think multiple seasons. All of this to say, it's not just Jay's move on his own podcast. It's out there in the world. It's other people's shows. It's pilot episodes. It's on camera. It's non-discriminatory. He drops mics whenever he feels like it, quite frankly.
It's just a power move. It's amazing.
So, James, the way we start these shows is we usually tell the story. I know I just told the story, but we're going to tell one more story. And that's our little tale today. So, when I made the Dukes of Hazzard, Warner Brothers said we wanted to have that real Super Troopers vibe. I said, stop right there. I said, I'll make this movie on two conditions. We get to hire Burt Reynolds and Willie Nelson. And the executive looks at me, he goes, to play the Duke boys? And I'm like, no, but I'd see that movie, right? And so we cast Burt Reynolds and Willie Nelson. I was shocked. These are my childhood heroes. And then we cast Johnny Knoxville, Sean William Scott, Jessica Simpson, Joe Don Baker. And we got a real stacked up cast, right? And now we got to cast the bad guy race car driver. And I'm seeing comics perform auditions for this role. And I've seen James Roday do it, who is, forgive my French, a nobody at the time. But but he kills the audition. He's hilarious. But this is like a big part in a big Hollywood movie. And the studio's like, who do you want for Billy Prickett? And I'm like, James Roday. And they're like, who? And I'm like, James Roday. And they're like, nah. We're going big. This is Warner Brothers, buddy. We're not going James Roday. So I'm like, well, what? We'll make a list. We'll take a look at the list. So the first guy I meet is Josh Brolin. And I'm like, well, I love Josh Brolin. Who doesn't love Josh Brolin, right? But he's awesome, right? But he's not as much of a joke cracker as my man James Roday here, right? And I thought, look, we got all these other guys. What do we need? Can't we just do this? And luckily, in my opinion, even though I'd love to work with Josh Brolin, he said no. So I'm like, guess we're going to James Roday.
Wow, I didn't see where that was. I thought for sure it was going to come down to the choice that you made. You set him up as your first choice.
Yeah.
And it was Brolin was off doing like No Country for Old Men.
Yeah. And he's like, I don't think I'm going to do the Dukes of Hazzard. And I'm like, okay, that's all right. So I soft sold him, but luckily he didn't go for it. And then they're like, what about McConaughey? And I'm like, all right. I mean, who can say no to McConaughey, right? So there I am in McConaughey's trailer in Malibu. He has 3 trailer homes that are connected in Malibu. And I go in there about 9:30 in the morning. He's like, you want a beer? And I'm like, okay. So we're sitting there drinking beer, talking about the Dukes of Hazzard, 9:30 in the morning. And I'm like looking at him. I'm like, he's funny, but he's no James Roday. And McConaughey is like, I don't think I'm going to do your film, but I appreciate you coming out to Malibu. And I'm like, all right. So I go back and I'm like, I don't know. He doesn't want to do it. And so they're like, show us this James Roday again. And I show him this. I mean, it was a goofball audition, like full on comedy audition. And they're like, that's what you really want? I'm like, yeah. They're like, all right. I mean, we're not, we're selling the movie off Jessica Simpson anyway. So James Roday. I get him down to Baton Rouge, and it's a miracle. I thought showbiz miracle. And he walks in, and the first scene he's shooting is a really big scene with Burt Reynolds. And the scene is where Boss Hogg, as Burt Reynolds, comes to see his guy, Billy Prickett, and talk to him about the big race and how important it is to win this race. And James is kind of a newer actor from a Hollywood perspective. You act in a ton of things, but this was like suddenly you were in a big Warner Brothers movie with Burt Reynolds. You want to tell the rest?
Sure. I would give the additional context that I had found out that I had gotten the role roughly 48 hours before I was needed on set for the first day I was shooting. And I was sitting in traffic on the 405, and I actually thought my agent at the time was fucking me. I thought he was pranking me because I hadn't heard anything about this movie since I auditioned probably. And I was like, well, clearly they're up against it, and maybe somebody fell out. I don't know. I don't care. You're going to Baton Rouge first thing in the morning. So it was one of those types of gigs. And I would also add that the first day I was supposed to shoot, they didn't get to my scene. And it wasn't the Burt scene. It was the scene where we run into the Duke boys out on a highway somewhere, and there's a little smack talk between Billy and Bo. And we ran out of time. And I remember going back to the hotel going, they have an opportunity to replace me now because I have not appeared on camera. And I didn't sleep that night. I was like, I think this is how big Hollywood movies work. I think they make these types of decisions, and then they tell me that they don't need my services, and I guess I'll get paid, but
that's sometimes true. That's sometimes true.
I don't think I'm going to be in this movie. So I was like, I had a sleepless night, and then the next morning it was like, nah, good. I had a call time, and so I show up, and I hadn't slept much, and now I have a real scene with a bunch of dialogue opposite Burt Reynolds. I walk on set, and there he is, and he's Burt. I mean, he's a little bit older than like he was in Sharky's Machine, but he's still Burt, and he's in the Boss Hog outfit, and he's got the hat on. And
You remember that day they brought the Bandit, the black Trans Am, to set, and he was taking pictures with the black Trans Am, and you're like, whoa.
absolutely remember that day. And needless to say, it's the biggest set I've ever been on. It was the best crash service I'd ever seen in my life. The crew was enormous, and I was nervous. Like, I was legitimately nervous. And Burt, and I don't know if Jay set this up, and God bless him if he did, but Burt saw that, I was a green kid, and he came over, and he didn't punch me. That's not where this is headed. He put his arm around me, and he's like, "Let's take a walk, kid, you and me." And so the next thing I know, I'm taking a walk with Burt Reynolds, like away from set. And we're in Baton Rouge. So I don't know where we were headed, but wherever it was, it probably wasn't pretty, but he was still, it's the thought that counts. He had his arm around me. And we're walking away from set in Baton Rouge. And he just starts telling me a story. He starts telling me a story about one of his earlier jobs, as an actor, and how he didn't know shit because he had mostly been a stuntman. And, it's really just about listening and being present, and it doesn't matter who else is watching or that there are cameras there, and that it's going to be great. He's giving me like a straight up, no frills, no bits, like veteran sage Yoda to like young Luke who doesn't even know where his lightsaber is, acting pep talk. And then he walks me back on set and we shoot. And I don't know, Jay. I mean, the scene's, it's not
incredible.
Horrible. No one like the scene that doesn't work in the movie.
No, the scene is incredible. It's fantastic. It was so cool to watch you guys walk off, even though I'm like, where the hell are they going? But it was cool. I mean, Burt, I have a lot of stories where Burt is did throw punches by my head, never connected. Though I was ready for the connect. I already had a plan what I was gonna do. I was gonna just lay him down on the ground, which is something I didn't want to do. But I was like 36 and he was 70, whatever. I mean, I could take any 70, whatever year old. I can tell you that. And now I know you're gonna go, okay, Stallone, Schwarzenegger, okay, fine, those guys. But Burt Reynolds, at the time, I could have taken him. But he could punch. Anyway, whatever. There are a lot of bad stories about Burt. A lot of rough stories about Burt.
That moment for him to take the time to a young actor coming on set and take him for a walk and give him just like, not a rah-rah pep talk or here's how it all works, kid, just to settle people down is, I mean, that's a gift. That's incredible. That's something that you take with you your whole career. I had the opposite experience. One of the times that I was on set with a named actor for the first time, it was Gary Busey. And we were doing a ridiculous movie where I was like in a loincloth with it was like a caveman comedy. And he came into this film for like 3 days. And, we were down there for months in Austin shooting. But it was still like, cool. Gary Busey's here. Yeah, this is fun. I get to be in it a lot. And he's there. And so there's some stupid scene where he's tied up to a tree. We're like holding him hostage. And he wakes up for a moment. And then I'm speaking. And then I look over and I take my club and I swing it at his head. And then he passes back out, right, to make him. So the cameras were rolling and I go and I'm saying my stuff. And then I turn and he goes, all right, wakes up and I take the club and I swing it like that. I missed it. I Hollywood in front of his face. So it looks like a hit. And I do it. And in the middle of the scene, he didn't take me for a walk and calm my nerves. In the middle of the scene, he goes, "What the fuck was that?" And I go, "What?" He goes, "You don't just swing that bat at my head. You take a beat, son. You take a beat. You look at me and then you swing the club."
and he just eviscerated me about how bad I sold my gag of knocking him out in front of hundreds of people. That's what I take with me. He's not wrong, though.
Right.
I
I was going to ask.
necessarily, I'm not a fan of the guy. He's like, you look at me, you hold it, and then you hit it. And
You're
that's
right.
how you sell the trick. But he didn't take me for a Burt Reynolds balk before Dukes of Hazzard scene. Like,
I mean, he was tied up. There's no way he was walking anywhere, but he could have called you over to him, you know. And
a
he could've-
million ways to
Yeah.
address that to a young green actor. I mean, come on.
But
love it.
I am forever grateful. I'm forever grateful to Jay for giving me that bizarre opportunity that I never thought I would have, and then eternally grateful to Burt for gifting me such a sweet experience with an icon that in so many ways juxtaposes a lot of the stories that I think we've heard about Burt over the years, and it's nice that I can slip this one in with all the ones where he just, beats the shit out of people or throws water on them in front of their girlfriends. Like, it's nice that there was this side of him.
He
Gentlemen.
told the greatest Hollywood stories of anybody I've ever met. And he also had a trick to it, which was he would start the story. And he goes, ever tell you a story about the time I was drinking in Midtown at a club with the offensive line of the New York Jets? And I'm like, we just met. Oh, you definitely haven't told me that. And then he would progressively get quieter and quieter so at the end you're literally like you're leaning your ear into his lips to hear the end of the story, and it's such an incredible technique. He told me this story. He goes, there I was 72 or 73. I'm sitting at this booth with all these big hunks of meat, and I look over, and in the next booth over, there's this skinny Dago wop sitting there, grease ball, when he's got 4 of the hottest chicks I've ever seen in my life. Now I'm at I don't know what year it was. He goes, I'm at the peak of Hollywood. And this guinea motherfucker sitting there with 4 of the hottest broads. And I'm like, that ain't going to happen. So I get up and I walk over there, and I'm flirting with these girls. And I'm totally ignoring the dude, just not even looking at him. And he starts talking to me, and I start talking to him. And then I'm like, hey, you want to go outside? And now me and him are outside, and it's cold. It's February in New York City, so it's about 30, maybe 24, whatever. And we start swinging, right? And we're going around. We're in a circle. We're going in a circle. And he goes, when this Dago hits me, I say, uh-oh. Because he has a ton of power in that punch. But I'm Burt Reynolds, so I'm like, bam. And we're going back and forth, and we're going back and forth. And after about 2 minutes, we are like sweating and out of breath. And I go, can we take a break? And he says, yeah. And I say, hi, I'm Burt Reynolds. And he says, hi, I'm Mario Andretti. And I'm like, what? I mean, it's so fun. That's why
And
that's why you love him. I mean,
it was Mario Andretti.
Yeah.
He was.
yeah, it was Mario Andretti.
Isn't he famous for looking Burt Reynolds when he was doing Smokey and the Bandit? Like, the best part of so much of that performance were the outtakes at the end of the movie, where you got to see like him and Dom DeLuise doing their shtick. Just looks so fun, where he would always look right into the camera and be like, be good to me today, baby. Make me look good. Make me look good. He would say it directly to the camera.
Dom was always his kryptonite. Like, Dom could like break him in any seat, which I always thought was very sweet. Like, he just couldn't not laugh at his buddy. Complicated fake, a mysterious fake, Burt. May he rest.
Yeah, it's a complicated guy. I actually like him. I mean, I don't, despite some of the things that we went through, I like him because it was like, for me, he was my hero. Like, like in a way, the mustache I grew in Super Troopers was a tribute to Burt Reynolds' mustache. Like, this is an important guy for me. So you end up
you got him at a good time. I mean, he was still feisty, he was still Burt, but he was older, and I think he reached a point in his life where he appreciated being appreciated.
Yeah,
and he actually liked the fans coming over and saying, and he liked telling those stories. And
sure,
and I think that was a good time to have him.
Yeah, I thought so.
Okay, he was in on the joke.
Yeah, exactly. Mostly. Mostly. So after that, James, you appeared in as in the pivotal role of the German delivery boy in Beer Fest. You bring the German team. The German team is working out and trying to get better at drinking beer and pouring beer into their mouths while they lift weights. And you come and deliver the beer that the American team has brewed, which is the same exact recipe as their secret beer that they've been dominating with. And once they get that beer, they're like, oh no, somebody else knows about our recipe. And they decide they have to kill you, the messenger, because now that the beer is out there. It was a big, long way of us trying to do the "don't shoot the messenger" joke,
or "don't stick rubber tubes up the messenger's nose" joke.
Right. So in order to kill him, what they do is they take these kegs of flowing beer and they put tubes of it up his nose, in his mouth, I believe in your ass as well. We definitely wrote that. I'm not sure if we shot that. I remember my father, who's a physician, was sitting there on the side of the stage, and I'm like, cut, that was great. And he goes, you know that will kill him, right? And I was like, yeah. I said, but if you put that much liquid into a person, they will not survive. And I'm like, yeah, we're trying to kill him. And he goes, oh, that's not nice.
After putting me in Dukes of Hazzard, there was nothing that I would have said no to at that point. I definitely owed J1 in a big, big way. And so I came in a page boy wig, and believe it or not, at least once a year, even though I find myself to be somewhat unrecognizable in that one scene, someone at an airport will scream out from across, the gate, "Beer Fest!" So thank you for that.
I mean, I love that scene. It's just ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Where were you coming from before the long-running series that you've been part of, which I want to talk with you about and break down and figure out the trick to how that works, because it's incredible. It really is. I want to talk about that. But where were you coming from before those first couple roles you had?
I had come out to do a very short-lived Fox series, and when it got canceled, I thought, I'll just go back to New York. I was like, I'm just going to go back to New York, was where I thought I was going to be anyway, and I'll do theater, and I don't know, maybe TV's not my thing. And then I got like 2 more pilots that would get picked up and then canceled before we could even finish like 5 episodes. And so I became convinced that maybe I myself was the kiss of death for these projects, because the only thing that was linked them all was that I was in them. So I was about to kind of hang it up in terms of like trying to be an LA actor. Like I really sort of thought that, you know what, this is not my jam. And then I got the Dukes of Hazzard crazy unexpectedly, and the Dukes of Hazzard definitely played a big role in me getting Psych. So, it was like, I think the movie opened really well at like number 1. And I think that was like the week that I had my meeting for Psych. And it's the only time in my career, or then, now, or in the future probably, that I'll take a meeting with anyone whilst being in the number one movie in America. And if that doesn't yield something, then I think you're probably doing it wrong. But if that means
See, that's a trip because you're carrying the ball so much in Psych for so many scenes. You know, you had an incredible supporting cast, but a lot of that was not necessarily a skill you had shown people who were taking the bet on you at that time, right? I mean, it's almost every scene of that show.
it's true. I didn't even think of myself as a comedic actor, really. I mean, I'd gone to NYU to study theater, didn't do a lot of comedy there. We all took ourselves way too seriously coming out of that program. And we'll, you find yourself auditioning for comedies, and then you get into a couple of them, and then you're playing a ridiculous role in a big movie directed by Jay, and then you get a meeting for a comedy series of being the lead, and the light kind of goes on of like, all right, clearly people think you're funny, so you better figure out like how to polish this. Like, your job now is to accept the fact that people want you to be funny, and that comedy is clearly your way onto the train. But it was definitely like a shift for me. It wasn't like, dude, I figured this is where I would land. Hell no. But when it happened, I just thought, okay, it's time to start studying, all of your favorite comedic actors and stealing everything you possibly can, at least out of the gate, to sort of establish some sort of baseline for how you're going to do this. So, I went back and started watching, every Eddie Murphy movie, every Chevy Chase movie. I watched Real Genius so many times that I can quote the whole movie. And I just sort of started kind of building a foundation of stuff that I liked and stuff that worked for me, and how to throw away a joke, and a bunch and stuff that nobody taught me in college, in theater school. And that first season of Psych, especially, was so much trial and error. It would never happen today, because we were on a fledgling network that most people didn't even know had original content. They probably only knew that USA existed because wrestling was on it. And then Monk came along and kind of gave him some street cred, and that's ultimately what bought us the opportunity to kind of find our sea legs on that show. But I mean, I was doing all kinds of crazy shit, just trying to sort of see what would stick and what would work. And I was doing it in real time, like while the cameras were rolling. So it was a lot of on the job training for Dule and I both, because Dule had never done a comedy either. Like he was coming
off West Wing, right?
Straight off the West Wing, where not only was it not particularly funny, like you couldn't change a word, like you couldn't change a letter in those scripts. Meanwhile, I was mostly improvising all of the time. And he was like, dude, what are you doing? Like, are you trying to sabotage the show? I'm like, I don't think I am. Like, it's not, I promise. It's not like, that's not my intention at all. I think I'm just trying to find the tone, man. I think I'm just trying to find out what this show is. So I kind of need you to trust me and sort of and roll with it. And he did, to his credit. And, the rest is beautiful, lucky us history.
I mean,
it had a great trick to it, didn't it? That first, you're pretending to be a psychic, but you're noticing everything, and it's the sign of a great series. It's a game you can play over and over and over and over again, and it can wear a million different stories and a million different costumes, and it works.
It did, and I don't think either of us knew that it would have the effect that it did or the legs that it did. I mean, at the time, we were just trying to sort of make each episode as funny as possible and kind of land the plane by the end and hope that it was getting a little bit better each time. But certainly, if you had asked me like that first season, hey, do you think you got a hit on your hands? I probably would have said, no, I've never been in a show that lasted longer than 10 minutes. This will get canceled while we're doing this interview, probably. Yeah.
Dule Hill is so good in West Wing, but like when you think about what ended up becoming of your partnership, your comedic partnership, you're like, who could have seen it coming? I mean, I knew. I hear when I hear you talk about not being a comic, I find it strange because the audition was so right in line with the way comedians audition. Like, like Keckner was in that movie, and Kevin Heffernan was in that movie. Like I was like, and Show Him Scott was the bridge between between the more serious actors like Burt and the comics. To me, Sean was like the center bridge. But you fit neatly on this other side with Heffernan and Keckner, in my view. I mean, there's a scene in the Dukes of Hazzard where you're driving in the middle of a race, like a full-on race, and you pull up a big gulp and start sipping on a big gulp. Like, we put that in the movie. Like that was just, I mean, you came up, I don't know, I think you came up with it. Like, it's like, it feels like you're a very natural comic, and that's interesting to hear. Maybe you just didn't realize it yet. Because you got timing and you've got innovation, and you improvise within the scene, which I think is sort of the key. But Dule Hill, you're like, how is that going to work? And then boom, this guy he's incredibly funny too. He's got so many great bits in Psych, you can't even believe it.
It's such a gift to work with someone for so long that you truly can start anticipating what moves the other guy's going to make in the middle of a scene, and know what you're going to do back without having to talk about it. Like, there's so many scenes in that show where, we both came from our trailers, didn't speak a word, and halfway through the scene have taken it all the way to the left. We're off the script. We're dancing. We're doing whatever we're doing. And we never broke it down. We never said, hey, I'm going to try this, think about doing this. It was just, we got to a point where our language was, we know what each other do. Just roll the cameras. We'll see what happens. And that's so fun. Every day was so fun on that show.
And I directed, I can't remember whether it was like 5 or 7 or 9, something like that, right? It was a prime number. And I remember being like, what scene is this? Because you guys were off, and I'm like, yeah. And then it would start to roll back to the story, and I'm like, oh, there it is. And they're just kind of, okay.
That's got to speak to chemistry with the showrunner too, right? I mean, someone who can.
Well, yeah, I mean, early on he was there, and then he was sending people up, I guess, who he believed could deliver a version of his show that he was happy with, because he was back in LA for a good chunk of it too, right? I mean, there were times it was just me and the writer, and we're like, I think this is it, right?
He deserves so much. He deserves so much of the credit for allowing that show to sort of become what it was.
Agreed. Because, and we turn in I turn in a cut, and they go, you want to come back and do another one? I'm like, I guess we did okay. And the cool thing about
one,
what's that?
You acted in one.
I acted in one. I played a choreographer who was like maybe a suspect in a killing. Was I the killer? No, I wasn't the killer.
You were a red herring. Yeah,
I was the suspect. And then was my cousin the killer? Was Sendel the killer?
No, he was the one that everything was happening to, and believed that maybe it was a curse, because there was always some fake supernatural element usually that had to get Scooby-Dooed by the end.
Right. So my cousin Sendel Ramamurthy, who became famous for Heroes, he's a really good actor, also from San Antonio, where James is from, and also a very good tennis player like James. And so my cousin, I remember he PA'd for me on my first film, Puddle Cruiser, Sendel Ramamurthy, and he was sleeping on my couch, and he had long hair down to his waist. And he goes, I said, what do you want to do in show business? He goes, I want to be an actor. And I'm like, you're never going to make it. I said, let me tell you something. I said, first of all, I had to bully my way into this, and I'm the only Indian in show business right now. And I said, the idea that you also are going to be there with me, I think it's just never going to happen. Plus, your hair's down to your ass. I said, by the way, just get in the crew side of it if you want to do anything. And he goes, okay, I'll take that seriously. So then I don't see him for 4 years. He goes to London, comes back, and I'm watching TV, and boom, he's on the show Heroes. And I'm like, what the hell happened there? And so, and so anyway, he becomes a successful actor now, and we get to act together in Psych, which was so cool.
You know how during the course of every long night, there's if you're drinking, there's one drink that you can attribute to putting you over the edge.
Yeah.
Like you can kind of pin it back to at my wedding, Sendel came up to me with a shot of tequila. Oh, like not just a shot of tequila, like a double shot of tequila. And I attribute that to the whole wedding just taking off to like a level 10. It was Sendel that set me off. Because my wife was on the show with him at the time. And he's still a great friend, and he was there. Everyone was, we were dancing, and it was all great. And then I had that shot, and the next thing you know, he had a tray of them he was handing out, and someone threw a chair at the band.
Was that you?
Uh-oh. No, it was not me. And to the band's credit, they just went, guys, come on, knock it off. And we go, oh, sorry. And then they just kept playing. But Sendel was the straw that stirred that drink. It actually wasn't stirred; it was a shot.
I forgot that. Did you know that he and I were cousins?
No, not until just now.
Yeah.
And I thought you were talking about you being cousins on the show. You're cousins in real life?
We're cousins, yeah. And Hayes is married to Ali Larder, James, who was on Heroes.
There you go. It all comes back together.
But the great thing about Psych, on top of everything, was it was fun to watch you roll through your 80s Rolodex of, that was one of my favorite actors. I'm going to get them on the show as a guest star. I mean, that happened, right?
I would say probably by the time we hit season 3, that's all we did. Everybody had their lists, and, it was bittersweet. It was sweet in that just about everybody said yes. And so there you were on set working with people who helped shape you as a young person. The bitter half of it was that, unfortunately, a lot of them just weren't working that much anymore.
Oh.
And, they weren't getting called that often. And so, yes, you got to work with like people that there was hero worship for some of us. But then they would come up and do Psych, and then that was kind of like, that was it, that. And so we were collecting, it was like an island of sort of misfit toys in a way, where we always were just like, oh my God, can you believe this person is coming? But then, you take sort of 2 steps back and look at it through a different set of lenses, and you're like, well, yeah.
Don't mean to cut you off, but you're dovetailing exactly at the way that you have those people that you admire come play on a show that, you guys are off to the races and they're happy to come work and join the group. You realize that if making a living, and I'm kind of dovetailing because I want to get your guys' thoughts on the strike and what's happening, but how hard it is when you see someone who's been on shows and doing stuff, and it can be 1 or 2 years where they don't earn income and they lose their insurance. So even though the rest of the world, I just read, this morning, Aaron Paul had, he kind of publicly aired this grievance that Netflix is running all of Breaking Bad, and no one is seeing any residuals from that massive hit show staying on Netflix. So it's like, if you're really looking at how to make a sustainable industry and you don't have gifts of like Psych giving you guest star roles and bringing you in, you're just off to pasture. There's no way to really survive if you don't have that income stream for the successes you had earlier.
Yeah,
that's a great point.
It's totally true. It's hard. It's sort of like, and then you hear what like Bill Maher said about the writers, and he's like, you're not owed anything, and it's like, show business is rough. And, just because you succeeded in the 80s doesn't mean you get to continue. Like, the whole thing is so rough. But Aaron Paul's right. I mean, there's the idea that the streaming thing has basically taken a socialist model and plunked it down in the middle of a capitalist system. And you're like, the success of Breaking Bad the profits that are being made on that movie should flow down to everybody, as it does in a capitalist system. But in this thing, you're like, nah, we own it. We'll just run it as much as we want to. And you got paid already. Like, that's.
But isn't there a case to be made that if you had success in the 80s doing that thing and you got paid at that time, you could have the Bill Maher point of view. You got paid for that. But if it's still living today and it's still being monetized and your performance is still, out there, then you're still working.
I agree with you that if a piece of material is continuing to be profitable, everybody should continue to get paid on it. What I'm saying is, what Bill Maher is saying is that just because you were on LA Law doesn't mean you get to be on Psych later. Now, I use that thing because Corbin Burnson was on LA Law, and boy, when I walked in there and saw him there, I'm like, holy shit, it's Corbin Burnson. And he told me the most filthy story about a famous actress. I can't even tell with changing the name. It's so filthy. But the beauty of that story is that Corbin Burnson was with that woman. And you're like, yeah, you were in LA Law. Like, I mean, that meant a lot to me to work with Corbin Burnson. And the other guy that meant a lot to me was Steven Weber. I was like, this dude was incredible. Like, just so funny. Like, he's one of those guys who I'll describe as like a leading man, like a comic caught inside a leading man's body. Like, Weber is just funny. And who's the guy? The guy, his name's Michael. He was in those singing movies with Elizabeth Banks. He plays like the judge with her. You remember this guy? He taught gentleman classes in Psych.
Oh, God. Michael Higgins.
John Michael Higgins. Boy, what a treat that was. What a treat that was. Yeah.
It's there.
Anyway, I wanted to say that before we moved on from Psych. But the strike, I'm really running out of, I'm running out of a lot of things in addition to money. I'm running out of patience. I'm just like, how much longer? Like, who's going to break? What's going to happen? Like, I don't know. And then Drew Barrymore, suddenly she's like, I'm coming back. And they're striking her now, and they're in the audience, the Writers Guild. Like, it's like things are crackling.
Do you think that now it's, no one wants to be in a fight, right? But when you're in a fight, you got to use everything that you have available to win. And the stuff that's happening in the negotiations feels like it's been a stalemate. And you're, negotiating against people with all different interests. They make other products, film and television isn't their main thing. So they're not going to really feel the pain. But if there was some tactic in the court of public opinion where, like, on October 15th, the unions, the WGA and the SAG Guild just publicly said, maybe we drop, if you have multiple streaming subscriptions, maybe you just pause one of them for a couple months. Don't single out anyone because everyone has to work together at some point. But if you take the fight to the streets and you just because everyone's looking to drop one all the time. I mean, you're
right.
Either on one of these things that if you're lucky enough to have a bunch of them. So it's just, my theory is drop one. That should be something that you say, like, everyone just advocates for someone dropping one of their streaming subscriptions until these labor issues are settled. And then we'll see if, people sign up again or not. But it's a nice way to advocate because you're not going to hit them in the pocketbooks by not making shows. The libraries are too deep right now.
I'm going to do
cut
that.
Off the revenue streams.
I'm going to drop one.
Do it?
I'm going to drop one right after this podcast. I know which one too.
I know which one too. Everyone's got one. They just kind of eat and they look
I
at their
was
credit
just
card
thinking,
bill
I'm
and they're
like,
like,
why
am I paying for this one?
fucking thing? I already watched that show.
Yeah.
Let's
talk to Fran about that. The Drop One campaign.
It's not a bad idea. It's dangerous because you won't probably sign up for it again. Like, I signed up. I'm like, a new one. Yeah, I'll sign up. Fine. I'm supporting show business. But, I think it'll.
Well, there's always one show that gets you to sign up.
Yeah.
And then you never cancel it.
Right.
So it's like a dangling, and that's how they get you. And then no one ever takes the effort to go online and cancel the subscription.
Yeah.
He's going to drop one. He's going to drop Paramount Plus, my guess.
Because I don't know. Then you get some cool Western shows on there and you're right back in it.
Well,
I don't need that Western shit. I know that's what he's thinking.
I watched The Offer and I loved it. And I watched Knoxville's show. I think it was, that was on Hulu. But anyway, I watched The Offer. It was great. And then I'm like, I'm turning that sucker on in a minute. Do they have some good Westerns on there? Is that where the 1871 is and all that stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think they've got all of
those shows are there. A universe there.
Yellowstone universe.
Well,
but Amazon comes with like your shipping subscription.
Yeah.
So
no one keep dropping that.
No one's dropping that one.
They know
if I dropped Amazon, my wife would drop me.
That's right.
She.
And by the way, like all 7 or 8 seasons of Psych are on Amazon. Like the full library when I went to see where they're living now.
Which I don't think we're seeing any of that. I mean, I honestly don't even know how that works anymore. Like I know if they make a brand new deal like they did a couple years ago and we ended up on like the Hallmark Mystery Channel, like that came with a little something. But when it pops up on stuff that it's been on before, whether it's Amazon or Netflix or whatever, like I think somehow that happens like a tree falling in a forest while no one's around. Like I don't think anything's coming in.
No, well they're licensing it. There's still a lot of money being
of course someone's
monetized. Yeah.
I don't think Jay and I
No. So is there anything else you want to promote, James? Are you trying to make any movies? Are you trying to direct? Roday is also a director, Hayes. So be nice to him.
Yeah, I mean, there was some stuff that I was pretty excited about before everything shut down. I would say I'm still excited about it, but it's clearly going to take some time before I can get back on the horse again. So
horror, is it horror?
Yeah, it's usually horror. It's almost always horror. So yeah, once we're all back up and working again, I hope to be behind the camera as soon as possible, because I think that's what I've missed the most.
Were you saying that facetiously, Jay? The horror?
No, he has a real love of horror movies, and you've directed horror movies, right?
Yeah, I've really only directed horror movies. I mean, I've done TV that's like all over the place, but when I actually grind and piece together tiny micro budgets, it's usually for horror films. Yeah.
And do you subscribe to that theory that pulling off a joke is like pulling off a scare, where there's a setup and a mislead and the tension, and then you deflate it?
Yeah. I mean, the anatomy of nailing a joke and the anatomy of nailing a scare are not dissimilar, for sure.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, having made Club Dread, I'm like, it started to feel the same. Setup, scare, setup, scare, definitely. So, and that's when I remember you told me about the concept of the surviving girl. Is that what it's called?
Oh, the final girl.
The final girl.
Yeah.
Which is like Jamie Lee Curtis is the final girl in Halloween, right? Because she survives. Is that right, James?
It's an archetype that can be applied to just about any horror movie from the beginning of time. And they call her the final girl because she usually, is the good girl in the group. She's the one who's not having sex, not doing drugs, is the only one that ever has any character development of any kind. Like she either has a problem at home or a sick family member or is going through something as you land at, wherever your main set piece is going to be. And then all the other kids are just there to get laid and get high.
And get
so
killed.
You can usually...
And get killed.
You can usually identify within, the first 5 minutes of the film who your final girl is. We talked about... that was back when you were doing your list.
That's a great concept. She's almost like a superhero.
Yeah.
But she can't die.
That's right.
Yeah.
And I bring that up because I talked to James back when I was creating this app, Vouch Vault, and I wanted him to sort of talk about the things that he loved the most, and he talked about this final girl list. But at the end of this podcast, James, we vouch for something we're watching, something we're reading, something, whatever, restaurant, anything. So I'm ready. I'm gonna go first. I have been listening to the podcast, and Hayes, tell me the real title. Is it Bust or Busted?
It's Bust.
Okay, so Bust is the Ryan Leaf story. And for those of you who don't know Ryan Leaf, he was a guest on our podcast recently, but he was the guy drafted number 2 to Peyton Manning in 1998. And everybody they're like, should we draft Ryan Leaf first or Peyton Manning first? Peyton Manning first or anyway, Peyton went first, Ryan Leaf went second, and then Ryan Leaf became known as the biggest bust in the history of the NFL draft. He became addicted to pain pills. He crawled into some houses and stole pain pills. He was arrested. He ended up in prison. Now, this is a guy who was at a $17 million contract, collected $11 million of it, went to 4 different teams, and eventually ended up in Montana in prison. And the story is told by him. And he's such a good storyteller, and he's so ridiculously honest. Like, up until this, my favorite audiobook sort of storyteller was Robert Evans, The Kid Stays in the Picture. But this one is in the neighborhood of almost that good. It's so fucking good. There are 10 episodes. It's called Bust, the Ryan Leaf story. And Kevin Connolly, who was in Entourage, is the guy who sort of made it happen. He was the guy who interviewed him and recorded it. So,
remind me, was it like a breaking and entering that he got busted for? He did something like what you believe, right? Like it was burglary or something.
He was working as a basically a farmhand on places out in Wyoming, trying to like do something with his time. And he would drive by these ranch houses and these ranches with like, and he'd look at them and be like, it was in the height of the opioid crisis. So he's like, and he'd go up to the house and ring the doorbell. Nobody's home. There's no doorbell cameras then. And nobody would answer. And he goes, I bet there are pills inside here. And so he'd force his way into a house, go into the bathroom, find the pills, and leave. And he said these ranch houses became his pharmacy. And occasionally a guy would be asleep on the couch and he'd walk by, tiptoe him, steal the pills and get out like he did. And eventually somebody called the cops and was like, they're like, what did he look like? They're like, he looked like Ryan Leaf. It was Ryan Leaf. So his offensive lineman from high school became a detective. He walks in and goes, you been breaking into houses, fella? And he goes, no, I was thinking about buying those houses, so I wanted to take a look at them and see what the inside was. And the guy's like, sounds good to me. And they let him go. And eventually he kept doing it. And eventually he gets arrested and put in prison. It's a fantastic story because he's so honest.
Incredible
By the way,
story.
Have you heard Patton Oswalt do Bob Evans?
No. Is it great?
I'll send it to you, man. I'll send it to you.
Okay.
It's yeah. Good.
Okay. So that's what I'm vouching for. Bust. What do you got, Ace?
I have been listening to more Jimmy Buffett this week than I probably have in 20 years. And I've been thinking about him. I've been playing him for my young kids because I didn't listen to him for like 10 years. I took him for granted. And when he passed away, it was a great time to, reintroduce him into our lives and the way he was as a person and what he romanticized. And the guy was an incredible entrepreneur. The fact that he did so many shows and people would drink so much beer at his shows that he just decided to start his own beer company. So at a Jimmy Buffett show, you were drinking Jimmy Buffett beer. I mean, that's kind of next level genius. His author and my friend, this was last year, he turned 50, and I read, as a gag, Jimmy Buffett wrote a book, A Pirate Looks at 50, and he's got so much like everyday wisdom in that book that he did. So I had read him that way. And the thing that I love most about Jimmy Buffett is I went to a concert once, or I went to a couple concerts, but it's the only concert where you can be walking out and you can see someone violently puking in the bushes. And you're like, right on, man. That guy's got the spirit of the show. He's going to be okay. And the guy can come up from the bushes puking and give you a thumbs up. And you're like, you get it. If you're like at a, Alice in Chains concert and you see someone throwing up outside, you're going to walk the other way. But at a Buffett show, it was part of the culture. So, yeah, it's kind of playing the greatest hits. But Jimmy Buffett is going to go on the vouch vault.
I've been listening to Jimmy all week too, and there's so many. And we had a Broken Lizard meeting recently. We were all talking about Jimmy Buffett and what a great. That song about going to Paris and marrying an actress named Kim, so good. And son of a sailor, and Club Dread was about Jimmy Buffett. The character Bill Paxton played was about Jimmy Buffett. He was doing Jimmy Buffett. And so when we finished the film, Bill Paxton knew Lucy Buffett from somewhere. And he's like, and so he arranged through Lucy a screening in West Palm Beach for Jimmy Buffett to watch Club Dread. So me and Bill Fox Searchlight flew us down to West Palm Beach, and we're walking through the West Palm Beach airport. And people will come up to Bill and be like, hey, man, I love you in Twister. He goes, oh, thanks a lot. And he'd hand him a $20 bill. And we kept walking. He goes, hey, I love you in Simple Plan. Oh, you're the best, dude. And he'd give him a $20 bill. He goes, always carry a roll of 20s. Those people are going to be your fans, and they're going to come to the movie. They're going to bring a friend. Going to all even out. And I was like, okay. So then we go to West Palm Beach. We go to like a multiplex, and Jimmy Buffett is fucking there. And it's me, Jimmy Buffett in the middle, and Bill on the other side. And every time, Bill's doing a joke about Jimmy Buffett, we did many jokes about him. Bill would grab Jimmy Buffett's leg and go, oh, man. And Buffett was laughing, and we had an incredible time. Then we went out for fish tacos and drank beer, and I was like, this is too much. The guy is so cool, and I got to know him over the years. Such a great guy, and the music was terrific.
Damn.
So I'll jump on your vouch. I vouch with you. What do you got, James?
Yeah. I'm gonna go music too, and I'm gonna vouch for Tears for Fears, and the reason I'm gonna vouch for Tears for Fears is because there's a whole bunch of 80s new wave bands that I never stopped listening to. I didn't really make it past, to be honest, like 1995 musically. I sort of still live in between the years of 1979 and 1995. And it's fine. It's fine. It makes me happy. But I will still go see those bands now when they tour behind their new stuff. And invariably the new stuff is not very good. And you go to those shows anyway, because you know that after they play 5 or 6 songs off the new record, they're going to give you, the stuff that you can get nostalgic about and that makes you, think about, your youth and things that you did that made you the person that you are today. However, Tears for Fears has broken that mold. Saw them recently at the Hollywood Bowl behind their new-ish record, The Tipping Point, and I got to say, it's a badass record. Like, they have come back together in their 60s and made music that's right on par with songs from The Big Chair, Sowing the Seeds of Love. The records that sort of define them from a different era, and like mad props to them for keeping their sort of fingers on the pulses of what people care about these days and threading that needle, because they played every track on the album before they even started teasing us with stuff from the day, and we were all just like, yeah, give us more. This is so good. So props to Kurt and Roland. Props to Tears for Fears selling out the Hollywood Bowl. It was a hell of a show.
That's 18,000 seats.
18,000 seats.
Incredible.
Yeah.
It's awesome to think they're still doing it. And it's good stuff.
I love it. I just saw you, James, at a Hatchie concert.
Yeah. And I got so excited. I was like, I can't believe Jay knows Hatchie. Like, I knew I liked Jay, but this makes me like him even more. I walked over and I was like, Jay, Hatchie. And he was like, I'm here for the opener.
By the way, Hatchie was great. I mean, they did a real nice job there. Yeah, I mean, I'm a big fan. Anyway, thanks for being a guest, James. We really appreciate it. It was so fun.
Thanks, man. And let's take this Drop One campaign. Let's brainstorm it offline. See if we can get it out there. I love it. Maybe we'll get Sendel, your cousin, involved too, Jay. That's a huge revelation for me. I can't believe it.
Yes. All right. Goodbye.
Impossibly handsome man drops Netflix. That's the headline that we can use.
So good looking.
Sendel. Yeah.
Just a day.
Mustache Tales.